Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, presented by Cattle, Season 5. This one goes to 11. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Sylvain Charlebois, the Food Professor.
Our special guest this week for our final recorded interview at Montreal's SIAL Food Innovation show is Michael Chadwick, a veteran technologist with Fidelio, a Quebec-based creator of food industry ERPs, cloud platforms that they build, they compete with internationally. He's helped vendors such as Goodleaf and Le Petit Breton. Sylvain, you didn't share a panel with him, but you presented, he presented. We're not a tech podcast, but it is a vital part of staying competitive for the modern players in the food industry. And Michael is here to share more than a few thoughts and lessons on the importance of that kind of digital transformation, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think, Fidelio is really an aggressive company trying to make a better. They're trying to build better connections with the food industry, which is great. And so they're very active at SIAL, and they're very active at different events. They've actually had me as part of some of their webinars as a corporation. So, and they do good things. I mean, it's always nice to see a company that has had some success outside of the agri-food sector coming in with new ideas to empower our companies in our sector, which is great.
Well, we'll get to that in a bit. Let's get into the news. Headlines in the New York Times, late nights. Both of you are up late or got up early. Trump storms back. That's the headline in the New York Times. After a dark and divisive campaign, a switch of competitor, and an assassination attempt, worrying about immigrants and eating people's pets, Trump is the 47th POTUS. Republicans take the Senate, may even take Congress, so that seems to matter less. So most of this episode, we're going to be talking about the implications of Trump as the U.S. president on the ag sector. What are your first thoughts? Were you surprised I was surprised at the quickness of the decision, the decisiveness of the decision. What were your first thoughts?
Well, I mean, the first network that made the announcement, I think it was NBC early in the morning. And I didn't know exactly what the outcome was going to be. I know that probably 75% Canadians wanted Harris to come in. But the reality is that we have to respect America's decision. And the decision is actually much clearer than in 2016. Yes. If you remember, Donald Trump lost the popular vote. This time he's actually going to win the popular vote and likely Congress as well. So we know Senate is in control of the Republicans. We still don't have a decisive situation with the House, but it looks like he's going to control the whole thing. So his comeback is historical. I mean, there's only one other person who actually was able to occupy the White House during a second non-consecutive term. He's only the second one in history. So it doesn't matter who you rooted for. You have to be in awe with what he accomplished, really. But the most important thing for us for this podcast, of course, is what does it mean for our agri-food sector? What does it mean for trades? What does it mean for world food security, Canada's food security, and all? So I've been reflecting on this issue for a while, obviously, because depending of the outcome, you don't know. I mean, I was leaning towards a Harris regime, and I did some thinking about that, but we now know the outcome of the election, and we have to start thinking about a free world-led Trump, basically, or Trump leading the free world, whatever that means, really. But the Americans will continue to have a huge influence on our agri-food sector in Canada for a variety of reasons. And one, I think the world is becoming more polarized. We saw BRIC nations get together a couple of weeks ago in Moscow. So that cluster of countries are clearly moving in a different direction to counter America in a way. And America is going to look at allies, going to look for allies to see if they can counter China, basically, because there's likely going to be a continuing trade war between China and America. And I'm saying continuing because when Biden was in power, he did not end any of the restrictions or sanctions against China. that were enacted during the Trump era. So people think that Trump is very much against China, but so was Biden. And so I don't think there's going to be much of a change there.
Well, it's a big issue, so let's break this down in a couple of different directions. First of all, let's talk about that. Let's talk about trade. So as we think about trade, and we discussed this on our last episode, that basically the two candidates were different orders of measure oriented somewhat the same. There was already clearly pressure on, as you say, countries that would be closer to and trade with to follow their lead, so to speak, on trade tariff issues, like the Chinese EVs, right? So I think my feeling is that, we need to be more so in lockstep with what happens and where the direction they go. And we've got challenges, right? We've got challenges with China. We've got challenges with India as we turn our minds to the U.S. and open that market. What are the challenges we're going to have? Because it feels like there's going to be more tariffs on a lot of things, more so focused on the BRIC countries. But it also feels like, USMCA or CUSMA or the free trade agreement, that's going to be opened again. It was scheduled to be open in 26 anyway. Might be opened sooner. But it's interesting, right? Because Trump negotiated that deal. So it's hard for him to say we got taken advantage of and that's a bad deal, because it was his deal, which it was not when he inherited. Or so you did a poll on Twitter and asked the Twitterati or the Xerati, I don't know what we call them anymore. Who do you think is the best for trade? And I looked at the results when I voted. Overwhelmingly, Trump seemed to be the one who was thought of. Now, I was at
for Canadian trade.
I'm in Vancouver right now. I sound a bit different. You're traveling as well. I want to talk about where you are. I was at a drinks party last night, and the general feeling was if Trump gets in, he'll be the one to break the dairy cartel. Like there was this. Is that what was behind that panel result, that Trump would be better for egg? Or how do you feel now? And what do you think the implementation is? Were you surprised at that
I think
result?
a lot of people now realize that the only way to make supply management better is by allowing external forces to influence it from outside. And that's exactly what happened with the United States-Mexico-Canadian deal. That's what happened with CETA. It happened with the Asian-Pacific trade agreement that we also ratified a few years ago. That's kind of what's going on right now. And Trump will likely going to continue. And I did post a message this morning on X about Bill C-282, which safeguards supply management should Canada enter new trade negotiations, for example, with the U.S. My guess is that Trump will just say, this is silly, kill the legislation, and if you don't, we're not talking. And we need the Americans more than they need us. So I honestly think if I would have testified at Senate this week versus last week, I would have said, Senators, do what you want with Bill C-282. You can actually enact it. Won't matter anymore. Trump will kill it.
That was my feeling all along, that if Trump and maybe potentially Harris got in, who cares about our bill?
But that's not how dairy farmers, because I spoke to them. They were at Senate last week. They actually believe that it will actually protect supply management no matter what against Trump. 282 is motivated by the fact that there was that Trump menace looming in Washington. And I told them, listen, I don't think it's going to matter. And in fact, 282 is actually going to make supply management more of a target for Trump, not less. So that's why
I've always stick it in their face a little bit. Yeah,
well, sure. Exactly. And so, okay, so you care about this supply, but we're going to go even harder. Okay. And so that's really the one thing that I think it's good news for the agri-food sector overall, to be honest. I agree with the people on X.
Really?
I actually think that for trades, it's going to be a good thing. But by the way, for people who
wait. So why do you think, if we assume, and it's early days, but we've heard a lot from Trump that he's going to put tariffs on everything to protect U.S. industries?
I don't believe it.
You don't believe it? Because the U.S. agriculture is very, it's one of those industries.
His goal, okay, and he's been repetitive about this, is to cut costs for farming, food processing, and everything else. Now, when you implement tariffs, you do the opposite. So I think he's going to be extremely careful so he's going to bring down energy costs. That is a given. And he's going to focus more on ethanol. He's going to want to export ethanol as well. So that's more revenues for the agri-food sector. But I do think that for tariffs, he's going to be on the fence. He's going to be extremely careful because I think that President Trump knows very well what tariffs do to inflation. And Harris, and let's be honest here, Trump lost in 2020 because of COVID. Harris just lost because of inflation. And I don't think he wants to make inflation another problem or a problem for him. So he's going to be extremely careful with tariffs.
You're imbuing him with a thoughtfulness that he doesn't usually represent publicly. I'll just say that way.
That's right.
The way you're describing him, he's like a super strategic player who's going to understand. It feels like he takes bigger swings and doesn't worry about the collateral damage.
The biggest problem we have as Canadians, I think, is the Trudeau regime right now and our environmental policies. I mean, if you look at wholesale food prices in the U.S. versus Canada, ours have actually gone up 40% more than in the U.S. since 2019. What happened in 2019? We started the federal carbon tax, okay? And that was Trump's last year in the White House. And the carbon tax was $20 per ton. Now it's going to be $95 per ton in April of 2025. And so if Trump is trying to bring down costs, bring down taxes, making the sector more competitive in the U.S., which is likely going to happen, how are we going to make our sector more competitive when, from an environmental perspective, the U.S. doesn't want to do anything related to mitigating carbon emissions and things like that? So your point about being in lockstep with the Americans is absolutely true. I think it's important to be in lockstep with environmental policies as well. So that's my biggest concern right now, is that if we continue to go in that direction, that's fine. But we're only 2% of gas emissions in the world, and because we are really prisoners of our own geography, being north of the U.S., we have to be extremely careful in terms of what we do with our environmental stewardship program.
You wrote an op-ed piece that the concern or the issue you thought would come to the surface is water. Talk about that from the U.S.
Yeah, water. Well, I mean, we have a lot to offer to the world, and including water and clean water. And I think that the U.S. will actually aim at that. And people will say, well, he's not going to create a pipeline. He doesn't have to move water. The only thing he needs to do is to have access to it. That's all. And there are ways to do that in order to support the American economy and American consumers as well. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how he's going to approach this. But to be honest, again, during the first Trump administration, trades, we actually were selling 20% more agri-food goods to the U.S. by the time he was done compared to 2016. Our GDP per capita grew 6.3%. And right now it's stagnant. It wasn't moving. So I actually do see this as very good news. But here's the other thing that I thought about, Michael, and we chatted about this on this show: mergers and acquisitions. What's going on in the U.S. right now? Kroger and Albertsons.
Right.
So there are talks this morning, that the Trump administration will offer a more merger-friendly economy, and we could see a bunch of mergers happen, including what I would believe would be a major one in the grocery industry, and that would be Kroger and Albertson. I actually do think, and shares are up this morning. Shares for a lot of companies are up this morning.
The market is indeed voting. I mean,
it's just green. It's just unbelievable. And I'm thinking, and we talked about Couche-Tard too. Yeah. And I've always said the biggest problem for Couche-Tard, if it is to buy 7-Eleven, is the U.S. because of the number of stores you can find in the U.S., 7-Eleven. My guess with Trump is that you've just increased the chances for Couche-Tard to acquire 7-Eleven and not face FTC headwinds in the U.S. as a result of the transaction.
Well, I hadn't thought about that. So many thoughts. Let's Let's take
You
a
want to talk
break
about the
from
farm
this.
bill as well?
Yeah, we'll get back to it. Like we'll get back to it after our
There's
interviews.
lots of stuff going on for sure.
There's lots of stuff going on. Let's get back to that. But first, we're going to get to our great interview with Michael Chadwick. But first, let's hear from our presenting sponsor, Cattle.
Ever feel like the world of ratings and reviews needed a superhero? Well, enter Cattle, the caped crusader with Canada's largest, most diverse, and daily active consumer panels. That's right, Cattle is not your average podcast sponsor. They're like that cool friend who always knows the hottest trends. I mean, they are the voice of the consumer, after all. So why choose Cattle? Because Cattle excels in consumer insights from your consumer while also blazing trails in the realm of ratings and reviews, pioneering the future landscape of user-generated content. Beyond valuable syndicated receipt data, they stand as unparalleled collector of reviews at scale, irrespective of category or price point, a testament to their impact, partnerships with giants like Walmart, Canadian Tire, and more. Visit AskCattle.com now for an exclusive The Food Professor podcast listener discount on your first review or research campaign today. That's AskCattle.com. Michael, welcome to the Food Professor podcast. How are you doing this morning?
Pretty good. It's my pleasure to be here. We had actually a conference this morning that Sylvain was one of the panelists.
Yeah.
How did it go after me? Because I know we started off really bad.
Downhill.
With me.
It went downhill.
I know, but after that, it
That's
picked
what
up.
he wants to hear,
It
anyway.
picked up, yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, actually, you were kind of, how we say it in French, the locomotive. So you attracted a lot of people for me, and I want to thank you for that.
Oh, that's great. I mean, the lineup was unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, you had La Petite Bretonne, and then Good Leaf, which is a really good case study.
Yeah, exactly. That was amazing to learn all of that stuff, the way they use water and reuse it and all of that. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Really
absolutely.
amazing.
So I'm glad that we were able to add Good Leaf to the program.
Yeah, that was awesome.
It's a great product, too. We've had them on the podcast and talked about the product. All right, we got a bit ahead of ourselves. So let's talk about you. Who are you and what do you do for a living?
Well, my name is Michael. So what I do for a living, I'm working for Fidelio ERP. So we are a ERP system mainly designed for everything that is tied to Agri-Food. So either that you do food transformation like La Petite Bretonne, or you are a large-scale food distributor. So people use our system to manage all of their processes. So accounting, sales, inventory, traceability, lot management, which is really important in the food business. So I've been with the company for 18 years now. And this year is...
Based in Montreal?
Montreal, yeah.
Yep.
And we have also a small office in Toronto.
And do you do work outside of Canada? Are you international or are you focused here?
That's, well, we starting now this year. So this year is, our 25th anniversary. So we just hired someone to do that, and we're going to start with, all the northeast of the new United States. So
It's a big market. A lot of competition, though, right?
Yeah, but honestly, we already are, against those guys here in Montreal.
Right, they're up
or
here
in Toronto.
pitching.
Exactly.
Sure.
So for us, that won't be any change. So.
And what makes your company? How do you win? What makes your company different and sets you apart? I mean, ERP for the listeners. We're not really a technology podcast. Yeah. Everybody knows it, which is enterprise resource planning, which is the big systems that power a lot of things. But you're not the only provider of those kind of things. So how do you win?
Well, first of all, we own the solution, so we're not a reseller. So it's like the example I always give is instead of buying your car at the dealership, is you have direct access to the actual plant, or the engineers that design.
Yep.
So that's what we do. And Audrey was saying this from La Petite Bretonne this morning. What she likes about our system is when she needs something new or she wants to improve or tailor-made for a specific process, because we own the system, we're able to do that. But also the system is really technology-wise at the top of the level. So it's web-based. Everything
on-prem or cloud?
It's all on the cloud. So we run it on Microsoft Azure, so it's really easy to use, easy to implement. And the design also is really user-friendly. So the user-friendliness compared to other large ERP systems that are really complicated to operate,
that might come from Germany, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, a quick question about that. So the pro and con of that, you've talked all about the pros of making a choice like that. The con I've heard, and maybe it's not the case in yours, is that it's harder to hire people because nobody's trained specifically. Like you can go out and find someone on one of these global SAP ERP systems because there are a lot of different places. Where yours is proprietary. Do you help train people, find people? Like how do you think about that with your clients who say, if I choose you, is it harder for me to find people on my end to run the system?
Depends on the market, because here, like, for example, in Quebec, where we are based, we have been here for 25 years, so people know our system. We have also large clients. So, for the trust of new clients, it's going to talk to them, knowing that we are already working with those guys. And also, it's not, like I said, it's not that complicated because it's really a streamlined system based on processes that are already known by those people in the, in the agri-food business sector. So the only thing, like you just said, we're not a brand name, but what we say is like we are the Canadian brand name. So if you compare to all of the other ERPs out there, all of our competitors are, those brand name solutions.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess, so let's talk about ag and food.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at your portfolio, how big is ag and food within your portfolio right now?
I would say for the past 5 years is more than half of our new clients.
Half of your clients?
Wow. In the last
5 years, yes.
Wow,
yes,
interesting.
Yes.
Is that why? I mean, you're at SIAL, you're visible.
Yeah, exactly.
Sponsoring stuff.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's part of our game plan also going out of Quebec. So, for example, we opened up our office in Toronto when COVID started. So, bad timing, but still we only focus on agri-food businesses in GTA. Okay. So all of our new clients,
there's lots of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we signed a couple of them. So now we're moving forward and having others. And also we just signed this week one in BC. So that's another market that we're going to target with the agri-food. And also because we have all those key features or functionalities that people are looking for. So we really decided to focus on that as our key to go outside of Quebec.
And that's like a sector strategy for you right now. Now, here's a question for you. Is that growth because you're just focusing on it more, or is there, in the agri-food industry, more demand for more sophistication, more productivity? What are you hearing from the clients and your prospects?
More demand for productivity, but also clients that they need a system to get for example, their certification to be able to export. So if you don't have a system that will have all of
asset,
exactly, so you won't get your license, for example, to export in the U.S. or in Mexico or in Europe. So these are some requirements. And sometimes also, for example, we have clients working in meat, so they need a license either by the province or a federal license. Right. So also it's required to have a good ERP system, or at least a system that does all of the traceability, because when you have a recall or a recall exercise, it has to be quick. So there's greater demand based on that.
That's great. So in terms of success, how do you see the future for Fidelio? How do you see growth? What's your path to success, I guess, for the next 5 years or so?
We are really now focusing on the United States, the market of the United States. But also we are really always improving the system by adding new features to, again, automate processes. So anything that is tied to, instead of having people, keyboarding information in the system, so using AI as tools to, automate processes, accounts receivable, accounts payables, forecasting the demand, helping to improve the supply chain, which is key for people in that industry. So that's what you're really focusing and using and moving forward. And also by listening on our clients, what really, because there's the future, but today what are their needs, what they need to be improving right now. Maybe sometimes I just got a phone call yesterday from one of our clients. He says, well, I got this opportunity for a new client, but I have to really focus on to improve my traceability. He wants this, he wants that. So we're able to really react quickly to help them, also to improve their business and get new deals.
From the time you sign on with Fidelio to the time you optimize your systems as a client, what's the expectation there? Is it like 6 months, the onboarding part? Is it 6 months, a year, 2 years?
Depending on the size.
ERP, we've heard nightmares about ERP implementation. I think we all know the stories.
Exactly.
But so when I'm sure your clients are saying, is this going to be a nightmare for like 2 years or what?
Well, it will if they're all just focused on technology, right? It's got to be a strategic digital transformation.
Exactly.
Right?
It has to be part of a plan. But sometimes also when we start the projects, we're asking for, are your processes mapped? For example, do you have all of your bill of material? So at the beginning, if the company is not really structured, well, that's the first step to help them, map the processes and all of that. Prepare before the integration. But typically, depending on the size of the business, it's going to be between 6 to 12 months. So to do a full circle.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And like, for example, at La Petite Bretonne, they have 2 plants. So sometimes we're going to focus maybe like doing the plant where's the head office and then do the satellite afterwards. So depending on, the strategy also of the client moving forward.
Let's talk about advice for your clients and what you're experiencing in the field. Because, again, we're not really a technology podcast. So let's talk about what you hear and what your advice is when you go to talk to prospective clients in Agri-Food. Is like, here are the 3 things you got to get right to make sure this works, your digital transformation works. Like if you're here and you want to go there, you want to start exporting, you're going to need a system, you're going to need us. What are those 3 things that... there's probably 10 things, but let's say, what are the 3 things they got to get right when they're thinking about how to transform their business to compete today and tomorrow?
First of all, they need to be able to, like I just said, put their good processes or best practice in place. But with the knowledge and the experience that we have, we can also help them and bring that to the table. That's one thing. The second one, your company now needs to be able to talk with all of the supply chain. So I'm talking about, EDI transactions with the major chains. I'm talking about integrating with 3PL partners across Canada, the US, and whatnot. So that's really key to be able to connect to other systems. And more being able to give access to your clients via a client's web portal for them to get the information that they need from you.
Transparency.
Exactly. So
has that changed in the course of your career?
Oh yes. At the beginning, like when I started at Fidelio 18 years ago, we already had that feature, but people, they were not there yet. But now everything is like on tip of, they have their phone. I need this, I need that. I need to know what this guy is usually buying from me. So instead of, calling and asking and whatnot, so before, like a typical sales rep for an agri-food company, he was going into the store, writing a piece of paper, and then he was calling the order desk. Now it's all live. And even more, he can say to his client, well, you're in the promotion in 2 weeks, you're going to be in that flyer, you need to increase your order and whatnot. So it's more like a scientific tool to help them to be more, for the client to have the right product at the right time, but for the company itself to increase sales and be more efficient.
What's the biggest challenge that you actually often see when you're implementing an ERP at your clients? What's the one thing that really becomes a big problem most of the time?
In the agri-food, I would say the lack of being prepared for all of the data that's required to be integrated into an ERP. So, for example, most of the time, all of the traceability lot will be managed by the quality department. Then they have production. Then they're going to have logistics that will manage the contract for buying the raw material and all of that. So they're working in silos, and now we're talking and we're saying you need to integrate all of this. And each one has a dependency or has to rely upon the other. So sometimes we do like exercising when we're going to organize a meeting and say, okay, if you don't do this, well, this guy cannot do his job. And if you're not doing it, then afterward,
he can't feed his kids. And if he can't feed his kids, he's going to be mad. And
exactly. So that's a classic, to be able to really, the importance of the data, but also the integration as a whole.
Structure and people, process, and technology, right? You're the third leg of the other two things. If they're not working, you got a problem. Okay, last question for you. We had somebody from Scale AI here yesterday, Mark, talking about the accelerator and all the things that are happening. It's no surprise. A lot of people are talking about AI. What kind of, if you could measure the impact of AI on your business, is it overhyped, underhyped, or how big a focus is? You mentioned it earlier in your conversation. How important is it, and how much are you guys thinking about AI for your clients?
For us, it's really, I think it's, I was about to say maybe flavor of the month sometimes, or over...
A little overhyped,
Yeah, but I think people are maybe talking about AI, but for the wrong subjects or the wrong processes. So, for example, in Agri-Food, one of the key aspects, if not the more important, is all of the logistics. So for us, integrating AI in this to analyze trends, being able to reduce lead times and all of that.
Waste,
that's the key factor. But afterwards, project saying that with your system, AI is going to tell you what price point you need to. So for sometimes I think it's overhyped. But it's really good to have it for specific processes to be more precise and more efficient.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
I think our listenership actually have learned a lot about Fidelio.
Yeah, thank you
and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
Yes,
and all the best
will.
to you.
How do they get in touch? Are you a LinkedIn guy, and where do they go to learn more about your company?
FidelioERP.com or Michael Chadwick on LinkedIn. So you're going to be able to reach.
He's on LinkedIn.
He's on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining Sylvain and I in the Food Professor podcast here at SIAL, and continued success.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay, we're back. Let's talk more about this election. So I was thinking about, we're not a political podcast, but I was thinking about what it means for incumbent governments, because really the Harris government was an incumbent government. Yep. And what do you think it means for our government? We were talking about bills that could live, die. I mean, Trudeau and his government will say, listen, we successfully negotiated with Trump. We've been the only government that's actually been in power when he was there. So elect us again because we know how to handle him.
The thing about the Trudeau-Trump relationship is it's not going to be like 2016. In 2016, Trudeau was incredibly popular around the world. And he was one of the most popular politicians in the world. 9 years later, he is probably one of the most detested politicians in the world. His rating, and Donald Trump can read polls, can read Canadian polls. He will know that he'll be dealing with a very weak prime minister, which puts Canada in a weak position. And Canadians actually aren't stupid. They'll know that by having Trudeau there, it's actually not going to help. And so at the very beginning, I thought, well, a Trump election could actually bring more attention to a Trudeau re-election. But I'm thinking, as I'm thinking things through, I'm starting to wonder whether or not the Canadian electorate will have any appetite to re-elect Trudeau, because people could see the Conservatives or Mr. Pierre Poilievre as Trump North. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case, because I do think that perhaps people will want to tool Ottawa well to counter Trump's bombastic, exhausting style.
Oh my God!
And we're in for 4 years.
I'm just thinking about that the next 4 years, and then we got this vice president.
But think of who's going to be supporting him. Elon Musk is likely going to play a role in his cabinet, and he's going to make a lot of noise. Robert F. Kennedy is rumored to be the next Secretary of Agriculture or Health.
Yeah.
So this is actually going to be quite entertaining to watch, really.
Well, I mean, anyway, like I said, we're not political. It'll be
Can you
interesting.
imagine Elon Musk dealing with Trudeau? Like, seriously. Here's the other thing that I've been thinking about this arrival of Trump back into the White House.
Yeah.
Cryptos. And we haven't talked much about cryptos on this podcast, but
true.
There's a lot of talk that Washington will start giving more attention to cryptocurrencies now. Trump has its own cryptocurrency. Elon Musk himself has actually talked about it a lot. So I wouldn't be surprised if we will start seeing Washington to start regulating that space, which really needs some attention, to be honest. There's a lot going on there, and frankly, it's confusing and disturbing at the same time. But I wouldn't be surprised if Washington, with Trump, will start looking at cryptocurrencies more seriously. And of course, that would impact blockchains and food distribution, not only in the US, but globally.
Last couple of things. One, I was thinking about the implications in the Ukraine. Trump has clearly not been a big supporter of America's support, so to speak, of the war in the Ukraine. And the fear is, and I guess we're now dealing with what's going to happen. Will Trump reduce or eliminate his support of the Ukraine, which, of course, between them and Russia, the big farm, the big farm output. Any thoughts about the implications of that yet in your thinking?
A lot of people think, starting with Trump himself, think that the war will end. I think everyone hopes that the war will end. And my guess is that Trump will try to end it because he's much closer to Vladimir Putin than Biden was. And so I think there's going to be an attempt there. And if that happens, this actually could be good news for global food security, because right now you're seeing a Ukrainian agricultural sector being incredibly affected by the conflict, and it's producing at 50-60% of capacity right now. The end of the conflict could actually make Ukraine more productive and could get back into it, because right now Russia has too much power, too much influence, and frankly Russia is setting wheat prices around the world. And I'll remind you, Michael, 20% of all calories consumed on Earth is wheat, and so that's a big deal. And so that conflict between Ukraine and Russia is really important, and I think everyone hopes that it will end, but I think a lot of people will want Ukraine to gain from what happened. I'm not sure that's going to be a guarantee. That's the only thing.
Well, that's the thing. And how give up and give them all their territory by threatening to pull all support is ending. But it's
but this is not a political. I'm just looking at global food security. Yeah. And the conflict itself is not good for global food security.
Of course not. You just before we went to our interview, you mentioned the Farm Bill Act. What else is on your mind with the Trump?
Well, it's almost a $2 trillion act. This is the Farm Bill is bigger than our budget in Canada. I mean, it's just a massive. People don't understand. I mean, it's a massive bill. It's going to be renegotiated. Trump is pro-friendly, pro-farmer, so do expect more subsidies. More insurance, crop insurance policies, more support for farmers, more ethanol. There's discussions about bringing more green fuel to the aviation sector, which is another interesting avenue. But all of these policies will impact Canada eventually, and so of course you got Wisconsin, who will look at the Trump administration as an opportunity to increase market access into Canada and Mexico as well. So this is it's not Trump 2.0 per se. It's Trump 2.0, but it's Trump 2.0 with a clearer purpose. Because we can hate Trump all we want, all day long, but there's one thing that I think a lot of people were unfair with Trump, is that I often heard that Trump was unpredictable. I have always believed it's the opposite. Trump is actually very predictable. His style is unpredictable, but from a policy perspective, he's pretty predictable. And so I guess that for Canada, it'll be easy to prepare. But again, I think as a lot of Canadians, I'm a little bit nervous with Ottawa more so than with Washington right now. To be honest, I'm just a little concerned that we don't necessarily have the right government right now to deal with what's going on in Washington. And if it means to give a new mandate to Trudeau, that's fine. As long as he actually gets popular again. If he's popular, it solves a lot of problems. If he remains unpopular at 20 points, Trump knows that, and that's a problem.
Where are you? You sound a bit different. I sound a bit different. Where are you?
I'm in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and I'll be talking to the hog industry, the pork industry, in an hour or so. So on stage, and guess what? I'm going to be talking about.
It kind of the speech makes itself these days, right? Ripped right from the headlines.
Well, they know. I mean, I spoke to them 3 times now, so they know that I don't really plan to say what I say. I mean, I just go with what's in the news, and they kind of appreciate that, and because I suspect I'll get a ton of question about the Trump election for sure.
And specific to the hog industry, good for them, neutral, bad.
It's very good. It's very well. First of all, 2 years ago I spoke to them. There were 200 people in the room, okay, and things weren't good. This morning there are 350 there.
Wow.
The hog industry, prices are good, feed costs are down, people are happy. I guess when I go on stage this morning, I'm going to be facing 350 happy people. Happy.
Well, I'm in the happy city of Vancouver, where I'm hosting a retail conference. I'm interviewing some really interesting people. For example, the head of AI at Canadian Tire. We're talking about that. I'm talking to some folks from Best Buy, and also some people from Western Pattison Food Group. I'm talking to someone from the Pattison Food Group later on in the day, talk about innovation. So looking forward to that. It's going to be an exciting. A great, exciting day. We'll see. I'm sure the buzz of this conference as well. I mean, when we think about the implication on the retail industry, there's a lot of concern about tariffs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's a lot of concern about tariffs because, 40% of all apparel in America is from China.
I think it was overdone because it's America first. And but when you actually look at the data, it's not really America first. It's America first politically, but economically, America is still buying. Still buying.
And we'll be together, you and I, next week at the coffee conference. Looking forward to that. So, and we had something the first time happen in our relationship together. For the very first time, we actually wound up in the lounge at the airport in the same place. That was, by the way, I just want to mention. It was so great to see you.
Our second home. Or third home. Yeah, actually, we ran into each other. It was great. Actually, it was awesome. Yeah,
it was fantastic. All right, well, let's put a wrap on this episode. Kind of a special episode, I guess. A post, as you say, sometimes these episodes write themselves, and I think we had a lot to talk about in the months and years to come as we watch this all unfold. For now, I'm Michael LeBlanc, media entrepreneur, keynote speaker, consumer advisor, and you are.
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Safe travels, everyone.
Take care.